for coming today. And this, what we hope will be informative for you. The goal of this is really just to give a little background of the RareX platform and the program and what we're doing, and see if it might be a fit for you or your organization to get involved with. So I'm going to share screen. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? Well, not. Okay. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different things about RareX pretty quickly. It's our goal here is to give you a pretty good high-level overview. And again, if there's questions, though, we have a very small group. Please raise your hand or put it in chat, and we'll try and answer it as we go along. But I'm just going to cover a little bit of what RareX is, exactly what we're solving for, why we even exist, how our approach is done, and what we call the data collection portal and program is. Talk a little bit about data governance, which is the main reason why RareX adds value for any patient or patient group trying to collect data. And just wrap it up with a little bit of explaining what the journey is for a patient or a patient group who wants to get involved with the data collection program itself. But first, big news. So last week, we announced we're actually merging with Global Genes. RareX was actually a concept started back actually with Global Genes, with even Global Genes founder Nicole Boyce. And rather than try and build it within Global Genes, kind of spun off the group, the organization, created its own nonprofit to really test the proof of concept and really to make it viable. And now is the best possible time to weave it back now into Global Genes. Global Genes will be the sort of the umbrella organization or brand, I guess, if you will. And RareX is going to really be a program within it, very specific program, very much focused on patient data collection and then sharing that data with researchers. And I'll explain how we do that shortly. So what is RareX? So it is a nonprofit. It was all created to accelerate rare disease research and treatments and cures, really by removing the barriers to collecting data. We have a term we use often called the next generation advocate. So patient advocates, it's no longer just simply about love and hugs and support, but it's actually, they are an active member in determining their research or how are they going to get to cures or better treatments. And patients like yourself and patient advocate groups have a lot of power because the data of the actual patients who are battling these rare diseases resides with them. And it's actually the pharma companies, the researchers who need that data. And so we need to work in collaboration with them, and RareX almost creates a platform for doing that in a very easy way. It's almost more of like a network that carries information between patients and researchers, and maybe even back the other way. So RareX itself is a platform. It's a technology platform, but it's actually a little more than that because we provide a lot of hand-holding and support along the way. What's very important, though, is RareX does not sell any of the research that's gathered onto the platform. It's available to a proven researcher, any researcher. All the data is de-identified, so the patient's name and email and all that are never given over unless the patient wants to do that later for, say, maybe a clinical trial or something. So it's all de-identified data, but it's looking at the data in the aggregate. And we're powered by some very strong technologies, actually, that have been around for quite a while. So it's already on a proven platform. We're just bringing along the different rare disease patient advocacy groups to leverage it and making it easier for them to leverage it. What RareX is not is we're not a replacement for any current research that you might be doing or some other clinician-sponsored patient registry that you might already have. We're supplemental. Hopefully, we can help validate some of that data in their studies, and in some cases, maybe we can even link to some of their data to the data that's on the RareX platform. So why is there even a need for this? Well, if any of you have been involved in rare disease research, what tends to happen is three things. One, it tends to get in these silos. So say you're doing a particular research, natural history study with Johns Hopkins. They own the research, they own the data in that case, and it's in a silo there, and it's not available widely to researchers all around the world. Or if it is, there's a heavier process because there were different IRBs in place as far as explaining the ability to share that data. So while there is different research going on in rare disease, often it's not available to the widest group of researchers who would benefit from that, and then thus the patient groups would benefit from it. The other issue is sometimes patient groups do jump in like, oh, we're going to start collecting data on our patients, and we're going to create an Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to use a SurveyMonkey, and we're just going to query our people and get all this data, and then a researcher might be interested in that. Well, the problem is the data has to be structured in a very specific way to have any value to a researcher. And so what has happened with groups, and Megan can attest to this with her group, is they go down the path of collecting a lot of data and then think they're doing the right thing, even putting money into it. And then comes time for that data to be turned over to a researcher, and the researcher says, I can't do anything with this. And lastly, and more often than not, the data just doesn't exist. The group hasn't really even started to collect data. And again, that's a very daunting thing to think about, collecting data in a safe, structured way that is of value to researchers, and that's what we do. So this chart kind of gives you a sense of at least the whole flow of where everything is. What happens is we work with patient advocacy groups like yours, and we create sort of a front door, a community page, and that's how your group will enter RareX, which is basically a survey platform, taking information from patients, asked in a way that's very understandable. It also has the ability for patients to upload their genetic reports too, genetic testing reports, which is also tied to their de-identified data. So again, everything they're answering is not tied to a specific name, patient name. And so in the platform themselves, they're filling out many different kinds of surveys. There's over 20 surveys right now, but literally each quarter new surveys are added. And then by looking across that data, researchers, whether they're international, whether they're tied to a educational institution, whether they're biopharma, they can look at this data across. And what's really great is they're not only just looking at the data maybe across a particular disease, but they might be looking at the data across many different diseases. So say they're interested in solving some treatments for seizures. Well, that's going to affect many different rare diseases. So they can have access to the data from the patients in those different groups. So today we have 41 diseases represented on the platform, and that's really over about 9 months. So we're adding more and more every couple months. What we do is we add them in sort of what we call a class. So we'll start a class every 2 months. That'll be a group of 5 to 15 to 20 different rare disease patient advocacy organizations. And we train them, get them everything they need to know about getting involved with this, even give them some tips on how they can promote it out to their community. But this is just a quick view of just some of the diseases that are already on the platform. And while that's just diseases, many of these diseases have multiple patient advocacy groups that are working on the same disease. So there's over 68 patient advocacy groups that are connected or using or leveraging the RareX platform for their purposes. So how does it happen? So basically there's a leveling of the questions that are asked to a patient. And again, the highest level is a level 1. That's basically what we'll call a head-to-toe survey. asking almost yes/no questions. Do you have issues with skin? Do you have issues with neurological development? Do you have issues with GI, gastrointestinal issues? And then depending how a patient answers that, they're served up a level 2 set of questions. So, we noticed you had issues with gastrointestinal. Here are some specific questions about your issues with gastrointestinal. And then there's even more deeper for some groups that the goal is to map deeper as far as questions, maybe related to a very specific disease. But at the way it starts right now, it's all at a pretty high level. And again, that's done for purposes of finding interesting commonalities among patients who are not only within just one rare disease group, but maybe multiple rare disease groups. So the example here was for, Leon, which isn't the whole disease name, but Lion. But basically, so they're very interested in issues related to cardiac, to neuro, and to vision. This is a full list of all the different surveys that are done on the platform today. And again, everything that is done in a very standardized way, done even with a committee of people to assure the surveys that are developed are going to be valid for FDA purposes at a later time. So what's the benefit for patients to get involved? Well, one, just through the process of answering the questions, they can get even a sense of how their progress might be. There might be a question that are asked that doesn't relate to what they're going through. But there also will be a lot of questions that they'll have connections to, that they'll kind of see where they're pacing at against others. If eligible, the patient themselves could be selected to be in a clinical trial. And now the researcher would not reach out to them directly. They would reach out through RareX, and we would reach out through the patient advocacy group to, if they wanted to recruit. And really the patient themselves decides that. There's a whole sharing data survey, and we ask, if available, if one becomes available, would you be interested in learning about a clinical trial for your rare disease? The other benefit really for patients is that just more eyes are on the data because it's available worldwide. It could be a citizen scientist in the UK, or it could be a clinician in India. It could be just anybody who has an interest in that, either that rare disease or even the symptoms around that particular rare disease. There are opportunities to connect with other patient organizations. In fact, that's another sharing question. We ask if would you be willing to share your name and email with a patient organization if you're not affiliated with one already? At any time, a patient can come back and update their symptoms. So it becomes basically a natural history study or a longitudinal study over time. The patient really does dictate who gets to see their data. So there's a whole sharing survey that basically they say who they want to allow to see the data. We recommend that the data be seen by the broadest group of scientists and researchers because that's when it gets the most eyeballs on it. And this is why many patient groups have joined us. Well, one, it speeds up research and drug development overall, which is what they're looking for. They also like the fact that we provide the structure and the standardization, and also to the governance, because there's a lot of very specific rules about security of data, about how data is handled in other countries. And so we manage through all that, not the organization. The patient themselves owns their data, always owns their data. So we will never, again, control who or dictate who can see the data. And again, we'll never sell that data. For researchers, it's just streamlines the whole research process too, because they have access and they can connect to, and maybe over time, to other existing data sources. And we have several pilots going on for that. Lastly, for groups, there's no cost to patients at all to do this. There's no cost to researchers. So, and again, we are a nonprofit, so well, the question will come up, well, what's your business model? How are you even able to exist? We get grants from many different places, including pharma, big pharma, because pharmaceutical companies, while they're developing treatments for these things, they don't want to get in the business of running patient registries, but they want access to the de-identified data because it can help them in their drug development or even possibly identify candidates who might be good for a clinical trial. So, so they understand the value of this, and a pharmaceutical company might have some special treatments in neurological or neurodevelopment. So they might stand up a bunch of surveys in that area. Another drug company might have interest in treatments in the autoimmune space. So they might stand up and pay for a bunch of surveys in the autoimmune space. And over time, we're going to fill out this whole database with a lot more depth. So for researchers, again, it's free for them. They can trust the data. They know it's standardized because of the vetting that we go through to make the data and do the survey question development. They also know the data is consented because the way our consent survey is done, it's again the patient who allows the visibility of this data. So researchers from anywhere could have access. There's some tools in the cloud that they have also to look at things, and of course genetic reports, which actually we just started launching last month, are now available to researchers too, and available for patient groups to upload. And again, with those genetic reports, we do all the work to scrub that data as far as de-identifying it, removing any reference to the actual patient themselves, but the genetic report is tied to that patient's survey data. So one question is just how is collaboration intrinsic to RareX? I mean, our whole goal of this has been to try and connect people, whether it's patient groups to each other around a particular disease, or whether it's researchers to patient groups or particular patients. And that's the whole ability of this platform, is for cross disease research. And then what we do is there will be some special tools for the leadership of patient advocacy groups where they can get some of the aggregated data back. So, for example, today we know on the platform that little over 60% of the people who have entered onto RareX platform are from the US, but the rest, like 38%, are from other countries. Now, RareX launched basically in the US. We do have plans to push out or market in a way to other countries, but to do that, we're also in the process of doing translation work, and we're meeting all the GDPR standards. That's the data standards for the particular countries that we're focused on. So, however, it doesn't stop a group who possibly somebody is, in Spain, who actually knows the US group that's already involved and they want to put their data in and they happen to understand English, they can definitely participate. In any case, any of the data that we can put in an aggregate form, whether it's demographics, whether it's certain symptoms that are more likely within the disease, whether it's even quality of life data. That data can be seen as aggregate level back to the leaders of the organization, which is great for the leaders because organization leaders can then market that to say, we joined up with RareX, we're doing this, and this is some new data that we know now about our patient community. As I mentioned, the goal of RareX is not to replace other research, but it is to complement it wherever it can, and again, maybe help validate some of that too. Go on next. So here's how the flow works. A patient within a patient community might go to that patient community's website itself, but then also link to the RareX community page, which again, this is sort of the front door for that patient community. They'll log in, two-step authentication, set up a password and get to read all the different terms of use and privacy policies. Then they get verified, and so we know that is a real person on the other end. So there's a authentication back, and then the patient begins the process of logging their data in. So they go through the whole patient consent form, a data sharing form, and then they begin to do surveys, and there'll be surveys that are all relevant to them based upon doing the head and toe survey first. Here's an example of a community page. So this is for a rare disease AHC. So this is what we would build and create for your patient group. Basically, it's the front door just to get them started, and you would actually point to this page from your website to get your community involved. Here's just a view of different community pages. So we do this in kind of a cookie cutter format because a lot of the same FAQ questions that are part of this page and other things are going to be very standardized because it's just really getting into the data collection program itself. And we give support along the way. So we don't just launch it with you and expect you to do everything. We create different materials, whether it's how-to guides, webinars, videos. We actually put the patient group leadership through basically a 5-week sort of what I'll call training. It's basically 1 hour a week of Zoom, just so they understand the whole data collection program, and they learn how that they can market it out to their community and just become advocates for data collection in general, because that's what's going to drive research within their rare disease. So how does one get started? Basically, they're reaching out to Megan or myself, and we can get you, there's a collaboration agreement that needs to be signed. Basically, all that is saying that you'll participate, you'll help promote this out to your community. There'll be certain things we'll ask for, like logos and things like that, so we can build your community page. You have to work with us to help launch it to your community, and that will be done as a webinar. We will present at that webinar, but we need your help to help support launching it. And then just ongoing reminding new patients that come into your community about the availability of the data collection program that you're doing with RareX. So that could be in a new patient welcome kit or all kinds of places, just even social media, reminding your whole community to come back and whenever there are new surveys available or life changes that they would want to come back and update their surveys about. So as I mentioned, it's it's 4 weeks of Zoom meetings. We have an extra one, and then it's more like Q&A that we do with you. And there's commitment to a 1 hour launch call with us. And this just kind of shows the different things that we take care of. You don't have to worry about, like the governance, the IRBs, the consent forms, and then things we ask of you, just signing the agreement with us, attend the training, provide the assets we need to build the community page. And this is your patient engagement team. So Megan, who's on this call, and myself are involved. And that's really it. Best value of a presentation like this is just to answer questions. So any questions anybody has? You can just take off mic and ask away if you like. So we must have answered every possible question.
Tom, I want to kick it off with, you were saying that once a disease community launches, so a few specifics. There's over 10,857 rare diseases, and
67.
But who's counting? We are. But not every disease has gotten organized and has a 501c3 or the equivalent of a legal entity in other countries. That's okay. a disease community can be a Facebook group. And there's also disease communities that have several patient organizations, several in the United States, several around the world. And the beauty of this is that nobody's paying for it. And this data collection isn't for an organization, a academic center, a researcher. It's for all of the patients in the world that have this disease. So that's why Tom, said we don't own the data. The patient organizations don't own the data. The person that enters the data manages that data and owns that data. So one of the things I'm excited about, a lot of things about the merger with Global Genes, but one of the things is we have these organizations where these patients or caregivers are just getting started, and then they have this Facebook group and they're asking me questions, and I say, I got a perfect place for you to go. There's a toolkit for that at Global Genes, or there's a really good profile story about a similar organization at Global Genes. But also over the last year, there's been things where I'm like, I wish that existed. And it was things that wasn't in our purview to create or research or have a focus group about. And always I was thinking, this would be so well done if it was done by Global Genes. So this is just one of the ways that this merger is going to be beneficial to all of the people involved, is that we have the added support and resources that Global Genes already has, which is very exciting. Tom had mentioned that there are lots of surveys, that we have over 20. I know that we're adding 13 more in the next few months, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that you only see surveys that are associated with something that you said yes or unsure to. So if you say, no, I don't have lung or pulmonary or breathing issues, you're not going to get what Tom had described as a level 2 pulmonary survey. But if a year from now you develop a pulmonary issue, whether it's attached to your rare disease or it has nothing to do with it, you would go in and change your answer from a no to a yes. And at that time, the new survey would appear. If we don't have a survey, for instance, we don't currently have surveys on seizures and sleep, but you indicate that this is an issue, then when we do have the survey available, then you would get an email saying, we're so excited to tell you that we now have the seizure survey. Please log in to answer. So I also want to reiterate that you can have multiple diseases. We have a drop down for the diseases that have partnered with RareX, but we also partnered with the Undiagnosed program and the N of 1 program. And let's face it, lots of people have multiple diseases. And the first time I gave Ehlers-Danlos as an example, somebody said, I have that too. And I don't think I've ever given it as an example with somebody has not said, I know someone or I have Ehlers-Danlos. So one of the many advantages of RareX is that we are asking questions on all of the body systems. It's not just about the rare disease, it's about all of the symptoms that the patient is experiencing. In terms of future surveys, and I know David is no longer with us, but he's asked that he get the recording. We currently have, the body systems. We also have a deeper dive in ethnicity because some diseases are more prevalent in certain geographic locations. We have questions about medications and supplements and diets, but we also have quality of life. We will eventually have quality of life of caregivers. But we've also, as we've spoken to other disease communities, like sickle cell, or like the Vision Loss Consortium, I thought, there's a degree of fear that happens when you have a loss of a skill, a neurodegenerative disease, losing sight. So that's something where we would, seek out key opinion leaders and say, are there surveys on this topic? If not, can we pilot one? And again, to Tom's point, we have working groups that identify the best surveys for each of these symptoms. We don't just make them up, and we don't just pull them off the shelf because that's what everybody uses. These working groups are made up of people outside of RareX, from industry, from patient organizations, doctors that actually see the patients, and researchers. So for instance, with the neurodevelopmental surveys, they started with 255 and they boiled it down to 13. I'm going to stop there because that was a lot of information, but I just wanted to highlight a few things.
Thanks, Maggie.
I have a question. It looks like Sarita has one too that if you want, you can answer hers first.
Okay, so sweet expression, once the patient organizations gets their community's input data, is there any information follow-up shared with those organizations? So yes, there's aggregate data that actually the patient leadership of those patient organizations will see. There's actually a dashboard that we create for them. So if they want to know what states the patients who are signed up for the data collection program are in, they'll see that. What countries, if they want other demographic information, they'll have that. If they want certain specifics around the disease itself, that dashboard's also being built out too. So yeah, we've right now we've kind of manually fed that information back to organizations that they can use for their own marketing or just for their own patient meetings. Thanks, Megan. So she's giving an example right now of the patient advocacy group dashboard. So this is the very initial one. As you can see, it talks about, shows the count by state of the patients who have logged in. It even just shows use. So what's the enrollment level at this time? What's the enrollment over the last 30 days? But more variations of that will be coming onto the dashboard too.
Okay. So, if I understand this correctly, we, as a group or foundation, would sign up with you, get our training in how to use your system. And then you would broadcast a Zoom to patients. That I'm assuming we would, just notify our patients, hey, there's this new way of gathering data that we'd like you to use. And
these are the people who are going to talk to you about it. And then the patients themselves would then decide whether or not they would register with you and take your surveys, which I'm assuming that as the foundation, we would have focused the survey towards things that are specific to our particular group of patients. And then once a year, they can go back in and update their information. Is that how that goes?
I'm going to add some more details. So one, the training for you is 1 hour a week for 5 weeks. And one of the topics, the great topic that Tom does, is how to communicate with your community. And he gives you a toolbox, and it has examples of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter posts that other groups have used that have been very successful. Then you, as the organization or the community, would host a Zoom, because this is you announcing your project. We don't want your community to think of this as, oh, this is the rare X disease name, data collection. This is disease name data collection for the world. And so you would it's kind of like a pep rally or a launch party. And then you introduce us and we give some details like, this is the browser to use, and this is what you do if you lose your passcode. And this is why it's really important to upload your genetic report and come back annually. Then you launch, and then you use the tools that Tom has given you to promote. And what I've learned over the last year is I usually talk to the PAG leaders and say, you're the one fundraising, you're the one dealing with the board of directors, you're the one dealing with new families. Find somebody who is on social media already, and let's help them be the promoters, because that's what it is. It's promotion. They don't need to have a research background or data science background. So then we keep an eye on things. And Tom may say, it's the 4th month and I see you haven't had anybody new enroll in a month or so. What's the buzz on Facebook? Not you're in trouble, there aren't enough people, but we want to keep the momentum going. Let's do another, coffee and pajamas party, and people can enroll together as a community. So we stay engaged and try and learn from every group that launches, like what worked for them. But really, we want to be in the background. You know, if genetic report upload is important to your disease, which for any genetic disease, it would be important, you need to explain to your families it's worth them finding the report, scanning it, and uploading it. If I do a 30-second video with my, Rare X shirt on, it's not going to get clicked on. If you or one of your influencer families or everybody's favorite clinician does a 30-second video with a script that we've given you saying, this is why we need you to upload your genetic report, because we as researchers are going to make an association between genetics and symptoms and blah, blah, blah. So we always want your community and your patient organizations to be out front, but we will help support you from behind. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Now, you had a question too, Lori, about the specificity of the surveys themselves. Like, will there be questions asked specifically about your rare disease? So the answer is no, not at first. It's because we start at a higher level, the head to toe, and then other body systems. Because what we've found is starting at that level, coincidences do happen that aren't coincidences. Actually, that whole groups within a rare disease community might start reporting on visual issues or a set of issues that really aren't even in the description of that rare disease. There's a symptom of that rare disease. So
Well, I noticed you didn't have anything on muscles, which is a fairly large group. I wondered if that was on your radar at all.
I believe it is on the radar. Well, I know this just because ours family one is an autoimmune one, and there's muscle, and I think I've asked that question in the past. So if it's not immediately there, I'm pretty sure it will be there in the near future.
So there is a head to toe survey about, do you have muscular issues? And if you say yes, there is a level 2 survey for muscle, but it's not going to be a deep dive. At the end of every level 2 survey, are there other issues within this, vision or hearing or muscles that you would like to add? So there's always an opportunity for a patient or caregiver to include something that they weren't asked about. We have 3 working groups that are wrapping up. One is neurodevelopmental disorders, and they have chosen 13 new surveys. The other is neuromuscular disorders, and then neurodegenerative disorders. There's 2 ways that new domains or symptom groups get a working group and new surveys found. And one is, we have 41 diseases so far, and we are looking at all of their symptoms and saying, you know what? A lot of these guys have immune issues, even though they're a neurodevelopmental disorder. We need to develop find the immune surveys. There's also the sponsors that Tom talked about, where there's a biopharma that comes along and says, I'm doing something in hematology, and you guys haven't done a deep dive in hematology. We want to sponsor the hematology working group and add to that. So there's 2 forces that bring symptoms up to the top. I will meet with a group ahead of time and say, these are the questions. Is this enough, or are your community going to be very frustrated? So for instance, we're going to work with sickle cell, but until we have a pain survey, we should not be launching to their community. That's just disrespectful. So for some diseases, they say there's enough questions, and we'll just make sure that they understand at the launch that the deeper dive surveys will come later. Rolling it out in parts also makes it a little less of a burden the first time around.
So if our particular disease would require doing multiple surveys, is it the way you've got your structure? I wasn't sure if they were just starting on a single generic survey, which then, depending on their answers, automatically sent them to more deep dive surveys, or if how all that fit together.
Yeah, maybe let me show the screens. Some of that.
I got it. Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
Okay, all right.
So I'm actually in a demo site, and this I'm viewing my previous bogus answers in the demo site. So this is, can you all see it says health and development at the top?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are very general questions. Have you had issues with brain and nervous system, behavior, psychiatric growth, cancer, head, face, eyes, vision, sleeping? I'm just going to try and find the muscle one, just collective tissues. Have you had an issue with muscles? Example, significant issues with the way the participants' muscles are formed or the way they work, including muscle weakness, burning, or stiffness. You may have seen a neurologist, an orthopedist, or a special doctor. If that person says yes or unsure, then in their dashboard, can you see the blue dashboard?
Yeah.
You'll see all these level 2 surveys. And so if I scroll down alphabetically, you'll see the muscle survey. Well, that came out in July. It should take me 5 to 8 minutes. It's got 10 questions and I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So it's not a deep dive. It asks about facial muscles, issues with muscle function, skeletal, and so forth. But here's where if there's something you want to report and they don't ask about it, you can hit yes down here and use free text. If you say yes up here, you get 2 more questions. Age the symptom appears. That's when you knew that there was a problem, or you as a caregiver knew that there was a problem, but maybe nobody was listening. And then age of diagnosis, which was when did it actually become part of your medical record. So this is just an example of a level 2. So you see, it's all about muscles, but it's not going to be everything that you want to report. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. That provides me a kind of a look at how this is actually going together.
And so once this gray tab says completed. Once you've completed something, you can go back, you can email it, you can view it. But if I said no to something, I can go back and say yes, like, no, there was no seizures. 2 years later, there are seizures. When I say yes to that, it's saving every timestamp. So it's longitudinal. So we will work very hard to help your community understand that if they answer this once, it's a snapshot. And if they answer it at least once a year, it's a progression of disease, which is natural history. Again, we will send them a reminder at least once a year, but more importantly will be the messaging that you are giving out on a regular basis to your families about the importance of updating. And they don't have to do it all at once. It saves if they, doorbell rings and they close out, they can go back to where they were. It will tell them if something's in progress. This one down here, it says continue. The surveys are optional, but once you start a survey, every question is required. And that's because researchers don't like it. If you skip a question, they don't know if you skipped it because you don't know, because it's not applicable, or you're unsure, or your doorbell rang. So there's always the ability to say unsure. In our demographic questions, you can say prefer not to answer. But the surveys are optional, but once you start it, the questions are all mandatory. So make sure we get a complete picture. Sarita, did you have any other questions, or did we answer your question fully?
You did answer it. I think I did just have one more quick question. I was just sitting here thinking, so we're very, very new to data collection and the conversation of research. And I think we're kind of weighing our options on, do we want to start with just data, just really, really in-depth data collection like you were just speaking of, or do we want to start with just jumping right into a registry. And so I honestly, for me, we have people that we talk to and get information from, because I don't know the whole difference between all of that. But and so I guess my question was, could the information that our families put into a system like this be shared to start a registry, or would those be two totally different things?
This is why we don't call this a registry, because the confusion around the word registry is monumental. So a lot of times if researchers collect a lot of data, they call it a registry. But when they hear that a patient organization collected data, they assume it's a contact registry, which is basically a Rolodex or an address book.
Exactly.
Registries can range from that. We call this a data collection program because we are collecting data in these surveys. We will eventually be collecting data through connecting to existing data that exists other places, and apps and wearables and other things. Right now, we're just talking about these surveys. But when I ran a registry for 10 years for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, it was similar to this, except the questions were made up by us. And the data, we had to find researchers to come look at it. And instead of the way we have it, where researchers know about RareX, they go in and they query. So a researcher can go in and look at data without knowing of your disease. And if they query certain symptoms, they're going to stumble across your patients. So I would imagine that you've started collecting data on your families, like where do you live, your email, do you want to get our newsletter, do you have a genetic report, who diagnosed you, that kind of thing. And that's great. It can't be used because it wasn't collected under what's called an IRB. And it's not super safe and secure the way you've done it. But there's other platforms besides RareX, Nord, Luna DNA, IQVIA, there's lots of them. And this is like buying a car. Depending on what you're looking for, you go and see, who meets your needs the best. If you need international data from people outside of the United States, you need to make sure you ask very specific questions when you're shopping, because it's very difficult to be compliant with international data. So some platforms will only collect in English, which is fine with large diseases. It's not so great with a disease of 25 people in the world. We have genetic report upload, but the genetic report is full of identifiers. So we have to take the information from your genetic report and manually enter it in the back door of the system, so it's there. So a researcher can see de-identified genetic data on Mary Smith with Mary Smith's de-identified symptom data. So this is essentially a registry, Sarita. It's just one of a different flavor. I would suggest, if you have a budget, deciding how you want to spend that money, and if you have just volunteers versus staff, maintaining your own data collection can be very burdensome, which is one of the reasons why RareX was created. I had to learn about data and IRBs and ethics and compliance, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it was time and money and energy that could have been better spent in another area of research had we had something like RareX 10 years ago. So I'm happy to send you a list of questions I give to people that are for shopping, questions to ask when you're looking at other platforms.
That would be awesome. I think for us, RareX, my little guy is helping me talk right now, and I know we're probably approaching time or at time, but RareX has been at the top of our conversation for some time. We were just, really trying to figure out where we wanted to get started, because, I think you hit a really, really good point. There are other organizations that they don't speak specifically to our disease group, but they have like a little touch of it here and there in their patient communities. And so they're asking patients for information. And I think that was really our delay. We wanted to make sure when we started asking, patients knew that we were going to actually use it for something. It's just not going to sit. And I think that's why, what you were saying I think what Tom was saying when he was explaining the slides, just I think that's why it was so critical to have like those toolkits and the verbiage and everything, because we want to be different. We don't want to be just another organization asking patients to give us their information. So,
And that's why Tom will build you the front door with your photo, your colors, your logo, and your disease name. We always suggest that the disease name be as general as possible and not the such and such foundation or association, because that's just one part of the disease community. But we can do multiple front doors for disease communities if people identify with one particular organization versus the other. By coming through that front door, your families feel like these are their people. This is where they belong. This is their disease name. They recognize the logo. Once they go in, they're now in the large database, but they don't feel like they are. And the benefit of that is, like I said, researchers can stumble across your data without knowing much about your disease.
And one more quick question. I'm so sorry. One quick question. So if we were to connect with researchers, then we would just refer them to our rare X. Like if we start the researchers that we've already been having conversations with, we would just say, hey, we've partnered with Rare X. Our information is there. Like, how would that look?
We're going to help you more than that. One, Tom's going to tell you to have a goal and try and get you to 50% of your goal as soon as possible. We don't want to send the researchers to look at data that's not there yet. So we want to make sure that you've got enough families enrolled and surveys answered so that it's statistically of interest. That's different for every disease. If the publication with the most number of patients has 15 patients, then anything over 20 is going to be more than what's been out there. So it just depends on your disease, and we'll help you get to that, like what your goal should be, and then we'll help you get to the goal. We'll be marketing this to all types of researchers all around the world. So we'll be doing that, but then we'll give you communications to go to your usual researchers. And there'll be like little training videos on how to get to the portal, how to set up an account, different ways they can do things. This is called a federated data access and analysis platform. So they don't just go in and like look across a spreadsheet. They go in and they can query on genes or symptoms or disease. And then once they look into the data that they're looking for, they start doing analysis in the cloud. So there's these statistical tools, and there's notebooks and sandboxes, and they can invite other researchers and lots of things I don't understand because I'm not very well versed in it. But we're in the midst actually right now of like coming up with easy training information for researchers. Many researchers are already using this platform. It exists for large cancer studies, some international studies. There's a 1 million person study in NIH called All of Us, and they are using this platform already. So the beauty of this is you can get the word out to people that don't know about your disease, and also that's on us.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, Sarita, I will send you that list of questions.
Could you also send that to me, that same list?
Absolutely. And it's not completely exhaustive. You may have technology questions, you may have, security, privacy, other things, but it's one day a few months ago, I was like, these are the things I wish I'd known to ask, in 2010 when I didn't know any better. So it's been a pleasure to have you all on today. I want to thank Tom for carrying the presentation. I was expecting my daughter to come busting through the door any moment. And always want to thank our Global Genes colleagues, some of whom may have heard this a few times already, and can provide me with tips on the slides.
It's always good to hear this again, Megan. I feel like I learn something new every time.
If we used any jargon, I had to explain to somebody recently at the NORD conference, the average patient does not know what a natural history study is. That sounds like something out of a museum with a dinosaur. And so I always say, we want to see how the disease progresses. If you answer the survey at least once a year, you will get a progression of disease in that patient. If you get enough patients, you get the progression of disease across the population. That to me makes more sense than we're doing a natural history study. But that's what everybody seems to want, is a natural history study. So I just explain it differently. Well, it's been a pleasure having you all. Tom, hit record and we'll share that. And if you have any questions, come back to us.
Thank you for the presentation.
Good. Thank you for attending.
Thank you for coming.